In a land already etched with the scars of time, a new shadow looms, not from nature, but from mankind's unyielding thirst for dominance. Iran, bold and unrelenting, has made its move. A strike, deliberate, precise and defiant. It has pierced through the veil of diplomacy and lit a signal fire that cannot be ignored. But this is not just a confrontation between two powers, no. This is a moment that has awakened a sleeping alliance, an alliance of over 40 Muslim nations. From the deserts of North Africa to the bustling capitals of Southeast Asia, a quiet coordination is now underway. Once disparate in voice, now united in intention. Watch closely as these nations begin to stir. There is no chaos here, only purpose. Aircraft shift across air bases in Saudi Arabia. Intelligence pings silently between Ankara, Cairo, Islamabad and Jakarta. Naval units reposition in strategic waters, and above all, a message begins to echo. Enough. This is not merely retaliation. It is a strategic maneuver, one that seeks not just to answer Iran's fire, but to reshape the power dynamic that has ruled this region for decades. It is discipline, forged by decades of watching history repeat itself. Yet there is a deeper story unfolding. This isn't just about weapons or alliances. It's about identity. It's about who leads, who speaks for justice, who rises when others fear collapse. Iran's first strike may have been calculated for shock, but what follows now is calibrated for permanence. Outside the theater, global giants look on, some with anxiety, others with veiled interest. They see in this moment not just the risk of war, but the potential for a new order, one where Muslim nations no longer wait for foreign intervention, but chart their own destiny. Meanwhile, the world listens. Oil prices tremble, trade routes quiver, and common citizens wonder if their distant lives will soon feel the tremors of these ancient rivalries reignited. And yet, among all the preparation and rhetoric, one question remains. Will the unity forged in anger hold when the dust settles? Or will this coalition, powerful as it may seem, fracture under the weight of its own ambitions? Only time will tell, but for now the world holds its breath as the balance of power teeters on a knife's edge, forged not in peace, but in provocation. Iran's provocative first strike marks a turning point in an already volatile geopolitical landscape. The strike was not merely a military action, it was a bold statement. With precision and timing, Iran targeted strategic locations that held both symbolic and tactical importance. These could range from enemy military installations, oil infrastructure, or perhaps even diplomatic outposts. The world has witnessed Iran's growing assertiveness over the years, but this particular move has pushed the threshold. It wasn't a warning shot. It was an intentional act, meant to challenge the balance of power in the region. This escalation did not occur in a vacuum. The tension between Iran and its regional rivals, particularly Sunni-majority nations, has been simmering for decades, often flaring up in proxy wars, cyber attacks, and diplomatic standoffs. However, by striking first, Iran has now moved the conflict from proxy engagements to direct confrontation. The timing of the strike is critical. It comes at a moment when global attention is divided, perhaps by other conflicts or internal political issues in major powers, allowing Iran to act with greater boldness. The strike was calculated to showcase Iran's military capability and its willingness to defy international norms. By choosing to go on the offensive, Iran likely hoped to project strength, intimidate rivals, and galvanize internal support by portraying itself as a bold defender of sovereignty and ideology. Sanctions have taken a toll, and internal unrest continues to grow. A military strike shifts the narrative internally, rallying nationalist sentiments while sending a message to external powers. However, this decision has not been without consequences. Rather than intimidating opponents, Iran's strike has triggered a swift and unified reaction from over 40 Muslim nations. Many of these countries view Iran's move as a threat not just to political stability, but to the broader Muslim identity and unity. The action has stirred memories of past conflicts and revived fears of sectarian strife, where Sunni and Shia divisions could be weaponized on a massive scale. While Iran may have sought dominance or deterrence, it now faces an unprecedented coalition preparing to respond not only in force, but with coordinated strategy, signaling that this strike may have awakened more than it anticipated. The Islamic Military Counter-Terrorism Coalition, IMCTC, often referred to as the Muslim NATO, plays a critical role in the unfolding scenario following Iran's aggressive military strike. Comprising over 40 Muslim-majority countries, this coalition was originally formed to combat terrorism in all its forms and manifestations. However, in the wake of Iran's bold and destabilizing action, the purpose of the IMCTC appears to be evolving rapidly, from a counter-terrorism alliance to a unified geopolitical force capable of responding to state-level threats. This is a significant shift in both posture and purpose. Member states of the IMCTC, ranging from Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Turkey and Pakistan to nations across North and West Africa, have begun engaging in high-level consultations. Intelligence sharing has increased, military readiness has been heightened, and several nations have repositioned key assets in anticipation of further escalations. The coordination is not just confined to military logistics, diplomatic channels are equally active. Foreign ministers, military chiefs and heads of state are aligning their narratives and preparing a collective stance. The message is clear. The Muslim world will not allow unilateral aggression to fracture its already fragile unity. This growing alignment among the IMCTC members also reflects a larger strategic understanding that unchecked aggression by any state, regardless of sectarian affiliation, could destabilize the entire region. Iran's actions are being interpreted not just as a challenge to specific countries, but as a direct affront to the broader ideals of Islamic cooperation, peace, and regional sovereignty. Many coalition members have long been wary of Iran's regional ambitions and its influence over proxy militias in places like Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen. The strike has served as a catalyst for these nations to finally act on those concerns in a unified and organized manner. Beyond military considerations, economic and cyber strategies are also being explored. Sanctions, trade restrictions, and digital countermeasures may become tools of choice for nations seeking to avoid full-scale warfare, while still delivering a coordinated response. The IMCTC, once viewed as largely symbolic, is now emerging as a central pillar in the response to Iran's provocations. Its effectiveness in the coming weeks will determine not just the fate of the immediate conflict, but the future credibility of collective Muslim action on the world stage. The Iranian strike has intensified deep-rooted sectarian tensions that have long divided the Muslim world, particularly between Sunni and Shia factions. This act of aggression has not only reignited old rivalries, but also brought them dangerously close to open confrontation. The fault lines between these two branches of Islam, which have existed for centuries, have often been manipulated by political actors to serve their own regional ambitions. Iran's strike is being perceived by many Sunni-majority nations as not just a military provocation, but a sectarian statement. A move aimed at asserting Shia dominance over a region where Sunnis form the majority. This perception has triggered swift reactions across the Muslim world. Sunni leaders are now under pressure, not only from military advisors and political allies, but also from their own populations, to act decisively. The fear is that any delay or indecision could be interpreted as weakness, allowing Iran to further its strategic reach and ideological influence. In countries like Saudi Arabia, Egypt and Jordan, where sectarian unity is considered vital to national stability, this strike is being viewed as a potential spark for internal unrest, if not addressed head-on. The leadership in these states is increasingly framing Iran's actions as a threat to the entire Sunni identity, and not merely a geopolitical challenge. What makes the situation more complex is the fact that Iran has deep-rooted connections with Shia communities in several key nations. In Lebanon, Iraq, Syria, and Yemen, Iran has long cultivated influence through political parties and armed militias. This network of proxies could be activated as part of a broader response strategy, further destabilizing regions that are already on the brink. The strike could trigger violent uprisings, proxy wars, or even terror attacks, as various factions seize the moment to either support Iran's narrative or resist it. In this context, the danger is not just of a war between nations, but of civil conflicts within nations, where sectarian identities override national unity. This environment of heightened distrust and fear creates fertile ground for misinformation, radicalization, and polarization. Social media is already amplifying divisive rhetoric, deepening the ideological trenches between Sunni and Shia populations. Religious leaders and scholars are being drawn into the discourse, some calling for peace, others fanning the flames of ancient grievances. The Iranian strike has thus not only escalated a political conflict, but also reopened spiritual and cultural wounds that threaten to divide the Muslim world from within. The global powers are watching the situation unfold with a mix of concern, strategic interest, and caution. The Iranian strike has not only shaken regional dynamics, but also forced global superpowers to reassess their positions and responses. The United States, historically involved in Middle Eastern affairs, is approaching this crisis with hesitation. Although it has long viewed Iran as a strategic adversary, recent years have seen Washington shift its focus toward the Indo-Pacific region and internal priorities. As a result, while it may offer diplomatic or intelligence support to its traditional allies, the US is unlikely to lead a direct military response, preferring instead to allow Muslim nations to take the lead in shaping the regional outcome. China and Russia, meanwhile, are carefully weighing their options. Both countries maintain complex relationships with Iran, China as a key economic partner and energy importer, and Russia as a military and political ally in Syria and other regional theaters. For these powers, Iran represents a strategic counterbalance to Western influence in the Middle East. However, neither Beijing nor Moscow wants to see the region plunge into chaos that could threaten oil markets or draw them into a costly and unpredictable conflict. As a result, both may use diplomatic channels to de-escalate tensions while subtly reinforcing their presence and interests in the region. The European Union, already strained by internal divisions and external challenges, has issued calls for restraint, but its ability to influence events on the ground remains limited. European leaders are primarily concerned about the humanitarian implications, refugee flows, and energy disruptions that could result from a full-scale conflict. They recognize that if the coalition of Muslim nations retaliates forcefully, the conflict could rapidly spread beyond Iran's borders, dragging in neighboring countries and sparking broader instability. These global powers are also aware that this conflict could redefine the balance of power in the Muslim world. If the coalition of over 40 Muslim nations successfully responds to Iran's provocation and demonstrates effective unity, it could signal a new era of self-reliance and cooperation in the region, reducing dependence on foreign intervention and changing the strategic calculations of outside powers. Consequently, while these nations may remain physically distant from the battlefield, their interests, influence, and silent maneuvering remain deeply embedded in every development, shaping the course of this unfolding geopolitical drama from behind the curtain. Iran's strike has sent immediate shockwaves through global markets, especially in the energy sector, as fears of a broader conflict grip financial centers from New York to Tokyo. The most direct impact has been on oil prices, which spiked dramatically within hours of the attack. The reason lies in the strategic geography of the Persian Gulf, particularly the Strait of Hormuz, a narrow passage through which nearly 20% of the world's oil supply flows. Any threat to the free movement of tankers through this choke point sends instant ripples through supply chains and ignites panic in energy-dependent economies. Iran's ability to disrupt or even threaten this maritime route grants it significant leverage, even when facing a coalition of adversaries. In the aftermath of the strike, insurance premiums for shipping in the region surged as companies anticipated potential retaliatory actions or further escalation. Exporters began rerouting shipments, while importers rushed to secure reserves, fearing prolonged instability. This uncertainty has translated into higher fuel prices for consumers and increased operational costs for industries across the globe. Countries heavily reliant on Middle Eastern oil, such as India, Japan, and several European nations, now face renewed energy insecurity, leading them to pressure for a diplomatic resolution even as military posturing continues. The economic consequences are not confined to oil alone. Investor confidence is rattled, with stock markets reacting to the volatility by pulling capital away from emerging markets and redirecting it to traditional safe havens like gold and US Treasury bonds. The psychological impact on global trade is immense. Multinational companies are bracing for disruptions not only in energy, but also in logistics and manufacturing, particularly those with operations or dependencies in the region. Meanwhile, Muslim nations preparing a collective response must weigh the economic cost of extended conflict. Many of these countries rely on stable energy exports or imports and share trade ties that could be affected by a prolonged crisis. Their decision-making is shaped not only by strategic and ideological concerns, but also by economic realities. They must maintain internal economic stability while preparing for the possibility of regional turbulence. The Iranian strike, therefore, is not just a military event, it is an economic tremor that has activated alarms in boardrooms and ministries worldwide, emphasizing how deeply entwined warfare and global finance have become in the modern age. You said, at the heart of this unfolding crisis lies a deeper and more symbolic struggle, a battle for leadership, legitimacy, and moral authority in the Muslim world. Iran's strike is being interpreted by many not just as a show of military aggression, but as a bold declaration of ideological supremacy. By taking the first offensive step, Iran is attempting to position itself as the defiant voice of resistance, the guardian of sovereignty, and the leader willing to challenge both regional adversaries and global pressure. This framing appeals strongly to segments of the Muslim population who admire strength and view defiance as a form of dignity, especially in a world often shaped by foreign intervention and Western dominance. However, this narrative is fiercely contested by many Sunni-majority nations who see Iran's actions not as leadership, but as recklessness that endangers the fabric of unity among Muslims. These nations argue that true leadership in the Muslim world should come not from provocation, but from wisdom, restraint, and cooperation. They view Iran's aggressive policies and involvement in regional conflicts through proxies as evidence of a self-serving agenda, wrapped in the language of resistance. As a result, there is a growing call within the broader Muslim community to redefine what leadership should look like. One that protects the Ummah through peace and strength, not chaos and division. This ideological divide now sits at the core of diplomatic and religious discussions across the region. Sermons in mosques, statements by scholars, and televised debates are framing the conflict in spiritual terms, invoking Quranic concepts of justice, unity, and responsibility. The strike has stirred emotions that transcend politics, pulling at the cultural and theological foundations of millions. For many, the question is not merely who will win a war, but who deserves to lead a global community of over 1 billion people. In response, the coalition of 40 Muslim nations is presenting itself not only as a military alliance, but as a moral front, an embodiment of unity against division, peace against violence, and stability against chaos. If they succeed in both neutralizing Iran's threat and maintaining cohesion, they may reshape the global perception of Muslim leadership for generations to come. This makes the current conflict far more than a strategic clash. It is a moment that could redefine the identity, future, and direction of the Muslim world at large. As the dust settles over the first strike and the world watches with anxious eyes, one truth becomes impossible to ignore. This moment in history is not merely about missiles, politics, or shifting alliances. It is about a deeper reckoning within the Muslim world itself. Iran's bold move has stirred the conscience of over 40 nations, not into chaos, but into action. Deliberate, collective, and potentially transformative. This is not just the story of a nation striking first. It is the story of a region awakening to its own power. A coalition once seen as symbolic now prepares to reshape the landscape of Muslim leadership, unity, and strength. Whether through diplomacy, military response, or economic pressure, these nations are sending a message. The days of silence are over, and the time for decisive, unified action has arrived. The battle that lies ahead may not only determine the fate of Iran's ambition, it may define the very future of the Islamic world itself. Good luck to all those striving for justice, truth, and a better tomorrow. Stay informed, stay inspired, and until next time, thank you for watching.